The world is full of amazing surprises that sound too bizarre to be true. From mothers who create genius children only to destroy them, to a guy in his pajamas crashing the stock market, to Honest Abe going all out to avoid a vote, these stories will have your jaw on the floor. This list is packed with jaw-dropping facts that are sometimes twisted, sometimes hilarious, and always entertaining. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 amazing facts that will stun you. But before we begin, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe with that notification bell. Thank you so much, it truly helps the channel. With that being said, let's go get stunned. 25. The tragic creation of Hildegart. Aurora Rodriguez Carrera gave birth to Hildegart in 1914, and she became the ultimate helicopter parent. Aurora had no formal education and was completely self-taught, but that didn't stop her from molding her daughter into a genius. The results of Aurora's teachings are impressive, to say the least. She had Hildegart reading by 2 years old, and the child mastered 4 languages by 8. This child was so incredible that she was enrolled in law school at 13, and at just 18, she had completed her university education and was promoted to professor. But where there's light, there's also darkness. And this story takes a devastating turn. Aurora's obsession with this young lady didn't end after Hildegart became an adult. At 19, she wanted to break free and live her own life. That was simply not in Aurora's grand plans. She decided that if her daughter wouldn't stay with her, then she wouldn't stay in this world at all. And shockingly, she took Hildegart's life. 24. Flash cash trader. Do you remember the 2010 stock market crash? Sure you do. But did you know that it was caused by a guy in London who was still living with his parents? And he caused all this fuss from his childhood bedroom? No? Well, let me tell you all about it. Navinder Singh Sarao helped trigger what became known as the flash crash on May 6th. He was a British trader with autism who had a near supernatural ability to read market patterns. On that fateful day, he was using spoofing to create a massive amount of fake orders for E-mini S&P 500 future contracts with no intentions of actually going through with them. The result was wild. In a matter of minutes, the US stock market completely plummeted and lost nearly 1,000 points. Nearly $1 trillion in value was wiped out before bouncing back just as quickly. Other traders and algorithms saw Sarao's fake orders and absolutely panicked, thinking there was a sudden shift in the market, and the prices of the stocks fell through the floor. It was mass mayhem. And when Sarao canceled all the orders, he managed to get himself a huge profit while the market was in complete chaos. 23. Globetrotters' unexpected loss. The Harlem Globetrotters have spent decades putting on dazzling shows to wow the basketball crowd with trick shots and comedy routines against their ever-hilarious opponents, the Washington Generals. Those Generals are lovable losers who always show up, play hard, and then flop out to give the Globetrotters their winning shot. Well, except there was this one time that the Generals got a little too serious. This whoopsies happened on January 5th, 1971 in Martin, Tennessee. It seems someone forgot to tell the Generals to keep up that losing streak, and they decided to go for the win. In what might be the greatest upset in exhibition basketball history, the Washington Generals beat the Harlem Globetrotters 100-99. To say the Globetrotters were at a loss is an understatement. None of them knew quite what to do. This wasn't in the script, and their victory dances were already rehearsed and ready. The crowd's reaction was priceless too. Some fans thought it was all a joke and part of a new routine, but the punchline never came. When the final buzzer sounded and the Globetrotters lost, everyone was absolutely shocked. There were boos from the crowd, the players were generally confused, and everyone felt a bit cheated. Everyone but the Generals, that is. They had broken the unwritten rule, and no one knew what to make of it. 22. Gibraltar forgot it was a city for 180 years. Did you know there's a city that forgot it was a city? Gibraltar is a tiny British territory that sits on the top of the southern tip of Spain, and for nearly 2 centuries it was unclear whether or not it was a city. Talk about peak bureaucratic nonsense. This all started in 1842. Queen Victoria formally declared Gibraltar a city and bestowed upon it all the proper royal fanfare. The proclamation was made, there were celebrations, it was a whole to-do. And then someone forgot to file the paperwork, and the designation never made it into the official records. Whoops, Poor Gibraltar just sat in limbo for the next 180 years without anyone noticing. It was only discovered in 2022 during Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. While reviewing historical documents and granting city status to several new municipalities and towns, officials discovered the royal decree for Gibraltar. This oversight was rather startling. They totally forgot about this city and hadn't even been keeping proper logs. Talk about a wild find. 21. Abraham Lincoln's leap from a window. Abraham Lincoln is famous for many reasons. He was the president who saved the Union, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation and freed enslaved people, and created the national banking system. Another thing he's famous for is jumping out a window to avoid doing his job. Before he had presidential dreams, Lincoln was a state legislator in Illinois, and he found himself in the middle of a heated discussion between Whigs and Democrats over some legislation. The Democrats needed enough people in the room to make their vote count, but Lincoln and his fellow Whigs figured out that if they didn't show up, they could simply block the whole thing. While most Whig legislators took the sensible approach and stayed home that day, Lincoln and his two colleagues decided to make a show of it. They showed up at the State House, and then jumped out of the first floor window to avoid being counted as present. It was truly absurd. 3 politicians were making a run for it like teens sneaking out of their bedrooms. But the joke was on them. The Democrats went ahead with their business and left Lincoln and the Whigs looking rather foolish. 20. Spartan bridal haircut tradition. Back in the day, ancient Sparta had some pretty intense traditions, especially when it came to weddings. While brides today get to wear a gorgeous wedding dress and carry stunning flowers, Spartan brides had their hair chopped off. And this wasn't some trim. The hair was cut so short it was often near the scalp. And what's more, she'd then be decked out in men's clothing and left alone in a dark room to wait for her new husband. This ritual was something else. The haircut symbolized the transition from being a young maiden to a married woman. It stripped away the innocence and beauty associated with youth and marked the milestone moment when she became a woman. As for dressing her in men's clothing, well, that was to help the husband transition from a life full of men and more men during their time in the military to being with a lady. The garb was thought to ease them from their all-male lifestyle into their first real relationship with a woman. Did it work? Well, after all that, I sure hope so. 19. Germany's Paris gun legacy. World War I produced some truly legendary weapons, but none were anywhere close to as ambitious as Germany's Paris gun. This monstrous artillery cannon could hit Paris from 75 miles away. It's still one of the longest range weapons ever built. The engineering of this weapon was impressive enough, but the logistics were absolutely bonkers. This gun was so gigantic that transportation had to be by rail, and it had to be fired using a specially built concrete platform. And that's not even the wildest part. With each shot, the barrel wore out a little more due to the intense pressure, causing the bore to slightly expand. To deal with this, they had to fire shells in order from smallest to largest. After about 65 rounds, the entire barrel would be spent and had to be replaced. The most astonishing thing is that this weapon of destruction wasn't exactly a weapon of mass destruction. Despite being powerful, huge, and terrifying, it killed relatively few people per shot. The scariest part was Parisians having no idea where the shells were coming from. 18. The Javelin Controversy. Once upon a time, back on October 24th, 1955, there was a Finnish man named Pentti Sarkoski. He was known for his poetry and definitely had a way with words. As it turns out, he was also one heck of an athlete. Sarkoski decided to take up javelin, and he was good. The best of the best, really. So good that he launched his javelin an incredible 99.52 meters that day. It was the farthest anyone had ever thrown one before. It was history-making, really, except it wasn't. Despite the impressive throw, it turns out that Sarkoski had a problem. He didn't grip the javelin the exact right way during the competition. Instead of holding it in the middle like all his competitors, he grabbed it at the end of the shaft. This bit of extra leverage helped him gain that distance. And while that's impressive from a physical standpoint, it wasn't so good for him. The judges decided the throw was illegal and ruled it invalid. He never did make it into the history books that day. Fun fact, As of filming, the longest javelin throw on record is 98.48 meters by Jan Železný of the Czech Republic on May 25, 1966 in Jena, Germany. 17. The Spanish town where 700 people have the surname Japan. Have you ever heard of the Spanish town Correa del Rio? If not, let me tell you a few things about it. First, it's near Seville in the Andalusia region of Spain. Second, it has around 28,000 residents. And third, about 700 of those residents have the same surname. The last name, Japón, meaning Japan in Spanish, isn't just some administrative mix-up or a coincidence. It's actually the result of Japan's most ambitious diplomatic missions in history. This all started in the early 1600s. A Japanese samurai named Hasakura Tsunenaga was under orders from the powerful Japanese lord Date Masamune, who tasked him with establishing trade relations and promoting Christianity. The mission lasted 7 years, from 1613 to 1620, taking them across the Pacific, through Mexico to Spain, and finally to Rome, where Hasakura met Pope Paul V. As the mission trip wrapped up, not everyone wanted to return to Japan, and settled in Correa del Rio. As they integrated into Spanish society, families adopted the surname Japón to honor their Japanese heritage. 4 centuries later, their descendants carry on this piece of history. 16. The history of yogurt. Yogurt has been a staple for thousands of years. Yes, thousands. In fact, we have actual written proof of it from nearly 2,000 years ago. This mention comes from a Roman author and naturalist from the 1st century called Pliny the Elder. In his encyclopedia called Naturalis Historia, he wrote about certain barbarian peoples who knew how to thicken milk with an agreeable acidity. Sounds a lot like yogurt. From what we understand, yogurt likely originated in Central Asia or the Middle East millennia before Pliny the Elder learned of it. Nomadic herders were storing milk in containers made from animal stomachs, and the natural bacteria caused milk to ferment and thicken. This storage mishap revolutionized food storage. Unlike raw milk, the fermentation process made milk more digestible, and it lasted much longer before spoiling. From there, yogurt, and similarly fermented dairy products, began to spread across ancient cultures from India to Mesopotamia. Even the Romans were known to appreciate this invention centuries ago. 15. Landmine detonation misconception. Action movies are full of huge blasts and deadly traps, and a whole lot of over-the-top explosions, which you're only cool if you don't look at them, that seem nearly impossible, because they are. One of the biggest misconceptions in films, especially war-based ones, is how landmines work. You know those scenes where someone steps on one and freezes because if they move a muscle, it'll detonate and shred them to smithereens?
Did he at least die painlessly? To shreds, you say?
Yeah, that's not exactly how they work. At all. Most anti-personnel landmines are pressure activated and detonate the second weight presses down on them. And I'm talking as little as 5 to 20 kilograms, which is absolutely in the range of a human footstep. It's the weight of that step that triggers the bomb, not the release after the fact. The guy in the film wouldn't even have a chance to lift his foot because there'd be nothing left of him already. While Hollywood makes these moments a heroic feat, that's not the reality. To be honest, the only way to defeat a landmine is to just not go near it in the first place. If you do, all hope is already gone before you realize what happened. 14. Some people can make a roaring sound in their ears. Are you able to make a rumbling sound in your ears just by thinking about it? Now, most of you are going to say no. If you can, congratulations. That means you and I are part of a pretty exclusive club, because that noise isn't just our imaginations. It's real, and it comes from voluntarily contracting a tiny muscle in your middle ear. That tiny muscle is called the tensor tympani, and its whole purpose is to protect your ears from loud sounds like shouting, coughing, and chewing. It does this by tensing up the eardrum and nearby structures to dampen the noise. And some of us can actually control this muscle consciously and create a roaring or rumbling sound that only we can hear. Only a small portion of the population has the ability to make these thunderstorm noises inside our heads. And that's quite the flex. Literally, right? Weird. Didn't know it was that rare. 13. Asthma is the most common chronic illness among Olympians. When you think about Olympians, you'd probably picture people in perfect health, or at least near perfect. But here's a fact that may surprise you. 7 to 8% of Olympic athletes have asthma. And what's more, this is a higher percentage than the general population. It's not just a coincidence either. Many Olympic sports create the perfect environment to trigger asthma and exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. Think about it. Speed skaters and skiers are constantly breathing in cold air. Swimmers spend copious amounts of hours in chlorine, breathing in all those pool chemicals. And runners and cyclists are constantly outdoors exposed to dust, pollen, and pollution. For those driven enough to reach Olympic levels, they don't let asthma stop them from reaching the top. From figure skating icon Kristi Yamaguchi to swimming sensations Ryan Murphy, Tom Dolan, and Amy Van Dyken, we've seen athletes with this condition on the gold medal podium again and again. Of course, they are carefully monitored and managed. But it just goes to show you that with proper training, talent, dedication, and a good medical team, anything's possible. 12. Commotio Cordis. Commotio Cordis is a rare but potentially fatal condition that occurs when a person is struck in the chest at the exact wrong moment. This can be from a fist, a lacrosse ball, a baseball, or even a hockey puck. If the impact hits directly over the heart during a very specific 20 to 40 millisecond window in the cardiac cycle immediately before the heart's electrical system resets, it can trigger ventricular fibrillation. The heart then starts beating chaotically, and blood stops pumping effectively. It doesn't matter how healthy an athlete is, nor do they have any underlying conditions for this to turn fatal. Survival depends solely on how fast people respond. If CPR and a defibrillator aren't at the scene within the first few minutes, the chances of survival drop significantly. This is one of the reasons AED devices are kept on hand, and coaches go through rigorous emergency training. While this sounds terrifying, and it is, it's also incredibly rare, so it's not really a reason to give up on playing your favorite sport. 11. Why do we vote on a Tuesday? Have you ever wondered why US elections are always held on a Tuesday? While it may seem random to some, it's that way by design. And this choice goes way back to 1845. Back then, America was largely agricultural, and Congress was seeking a workaround to the realities of farm life so as many people as possible could get to the polls. The best way to do that was to standardize presidential election dates. This is all about logistics. The month of November was the top choice, since it was after the harvesting season, and Tuesday was chosen because that's how long it would reasonably take people to get to their polling place. With most voters living rurally, travel times and distances were significant. Sunday was a day of worship and rest, leaving Monday for travel and Tuesday for voting. Why not Wednesday instead? Well, that was typically the day the markets were in town, so that wasn't doable at all. Tuesday was truly the sweet spot and would leave the rest of the week open to travel home, prepare for the market, and to tend to those chores. This system made perfect sense at the time, and has carried on since. Why hasn't it changed to fit in better with today's world? It all comes down to tradition and bureaucratic red tape. 10. The ice cream taster with $1 million tongue. You've heard of celebrities like Mariah Carey and Cristiano Ronaldo insuring their legs, but have you heard about the ice cream taster who insured his tongue? John Harrison served as Dreyer's Edie's ice cream official taste tester from 1980 to 2010, and his tongue became so valuable to the company that they insured it for 1 million smackaroos through Lloyd's of London. It sounds excessive, but it truly isn't. Harrison's job wasn't just licking an ice cream cone. He was responsible for ensuring quality, consistency, and balance in every single batch that the company produced in the years he worked there. He had an incredibly refined palate that could detect even the smallest of changes. Harrison was quality control to the highest degree. He sampled more than 200 million gallons of ice cream over the course of his career, and in 1997, he was awarded the American Tasting Institute's Master Taster of the Year title. Funny enough, he never actually swallowed any of the ice cream. Much like a wine taster, he would taste and spit. And there were a few downsides. Harrison had to adhere to an extremely strict diet to keep his palate on point. No spicy foods, onions, garlic, caffeine, or alcohol for this guy. Today, the man who held arguably one of the coolest jobs on the planet is a retired 82-year-old senior living his best life out in California. 9. Brown fat. As adults, we have the ability to shiver when we're cold as a way to warm ourselves up. Babies, on the other hand, do not. Their teeny tiny brand new muscles and nervous systems aren't developed enough for that. Instead, they rely on a special type of fat tissue to keep them warm. Brown adipose tissue, or brown fat, is completely different from the regular white fat we carry around as grown-ups. White fat stores energy, but brown is packed with mitochondria that can burn calories directly to produce heat. This process is called non-shivering thermogenesis, and it's incredibly effective at keeping infants warm. The brown coloring of that fatty tissue comes from iron-rich proteins. Most adults have small amounts of this remaining, mostly around the neck and shoulders, but for the rest of our bodies, it tends to disappear as our bodies learn to shiver. This is a brilliant adaptation that helps vulnerable infants survive the first few months of life. 8. Why Donald Duck is the Jerry Lewis of Germany? The most popular Disney character in America is the iconic Mickey Mouse. I mean, who doesn't love him? Hey, over in Germany though, Mickey takes a back seat to his friend, Donald. This is all thanks to one brilliant translator named Erika Fuchs. In the 50s, Fuchs began translating Disney comics for German magazines. And while doing so, she completely reinvented Donald Duck's character. She gave him German wit, satire, and some serious intellectual humor. Her stories had a ton of clever wordplay and cultural references, and the German people ate it up. Essentially, Fuchs turned him into the German version of Jerry Lewis. Just as Lewis became a comedy icon in America and France, Donald became a cultural phenomenon. Fuchs spent decades keeping Donald smart, funny, and so entertaining that adults love him just as much as children. So much so, Germans still prefer her version of Donald over the animated one. 7. Cowboy Load. Have you ever heard the term Cowboy Load and wondered where it came from? Well, let me tell you. Cowboy Load refers to the traditional way of carrying your revolver safely. Specifically carrying a 6-shooter where only 5 chambers are loaded, leaving one empty. This dates back to the 19th century when guns like the Colt single-action army had the firing pin built directly into the hammer. When the hammer rested on a loaded chamber, even a small bump could make it fire accidentally. Too many cowboys learned this the hard way. So they left one chamber empty so they wouldn't cause themselves, or anyone else, unintended injury. This load 1, skip 1, load 4 was the perfect solution. The hammer would always rest on an empty chamber, still giving them 5 rounds to shoot off when needed, and kept them from worrying they'd shoot off their own toe. 6. The only person to be acquitted at the Auschwitz trials. After World War II, there were a series of trials where dozens of SS personnel faced the consequences of their war crime actions for their roles in the Holocaust. From 1947 to 1965, these soldiers and officers stood before judges in Germany and Poland to learn their fate. All of them went to prison. Except one man. German SS physician Hans Munch was the only person to be acquitted for his crimes despite being stationed at a concentration camp. This all came down to his absolute refusal to participate in the horrific process of selecting which prisoners were sent to the gas chambers. While his colleagues were actively deciding who lived and who died, Hans treated inmates as humanely as possible, even providing survivors medical care to the point where he risked punishment himself. And more than that, he fabricated medical diagnoses to save as many people as possible. His kindness was not lost on the prisoners, and several survivors came forward during his trial to testify on his behalf. Those testimonies were so compelling that he became the only SS officer at Auschwitz to receive an acquittal. Munch proved that even in the most impossible of situations, compassion was still possible. He didn't bend to a regime. He followed his oath as a doctor and tried his best to do as little harm as possible. 5. How to paralyze a shark. Sharks terrify swimmers and surfers daily with their sharp teeth and powerful jaws. But they have a weakness that's kind of funny. Did you know that when some sharks are flipped onto their backs, they go into a trance? Tonic immobility is a natural response and can completely paralyze a shark for up to 15 minutes. Why does this happen? Well, we're not completely sure. Scientists believed this was happening for 3 reasons. 1, it's simply the shark playing dead to throw off a predator. 2, this seems to occur during the mating season and sharks will go into this state during copulation. And 3, it can be a simple case of sensory overload, and the shark just needs a break. All these have been debunked though, and the search for the reason continues. This little party trick is an excellent tool for researchers. When scientists need a few minutes to run tests and experiments, all they have to do is flip them over and the shark will go into this animal hypnosis and give the team time to get their work done. But time is of the essence, of course. A shark can't be in the state for extended periods without it becoming life-threatening. 4. The world's oldest tattoos. Tattoos. Many of you have them, many of us love them, and some of you probably have your next appointment already booked. Though, have you ever wondered where and when body art originated? Interestingly enough, the first known tattooed person dates back over 5,000 years, and their name is Ötzi the Iceman. He lived around 3250 BCE and was discovered naturally mummified in the Alps in 1991. This man had 61 visible tattoos on his preserved skin. Of course, these were much different than our modern art. His tattoos were mostly simple lines and crosses created by rubbing charcoal into small cuts on the skin that were strategically placed on areas of his body that showed signs of injury, wear, and illness. They were particularly found on his lower back and joints. Researchers suggest the tattoos may be related more to pain relief or a form of ancient acupuncture than decorative purposes. The discovery of his tattooed body is truly a remarkable find. Whether for health, ritual, or social purposes, Ötzi's tattoos prove that humans have been marking up their bodies with some form of permanent ink for far longer than anyone ever thought possible. So the next time your parents tell you no one did this back in their day, I'll tell them all about Ötzi and how he was getting inked up more than a millennium ago. 3. Halibut versus salmon. Are you aware that halibut undergo one of the most fascinating transformations in the animal kingdom? And this one is weirder and wilder than a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Allow me to explain. When halibut first hatch, they look like a normal fish. They have one eye on each side of their head and swim through water much like salmon. However, something completely unhinged happens as they grow. One of their eyes begins to migrate across the top of their head to join the other one. And that's not all. Their entire body flattens out like a pancake, and they completely stop swimming upright. They settle on the ocean floor and spend the rest of their lives swimming sideways with both eyes facing upwards. The side the eyes land on depends on the species, and while it sounds strange, it makes sense from a survival standpoint. They can spot predators who are above them and quickly camouflage themselves on the sea floor. It's a dramatic makeover, but it works. 2. Texas's power grid. Texas is the only state in America that has its very own power grid. While the rest of the country relies solely on two main grids, the eastern and western interconnections, Texas runs approximately 90% of its power through the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT, which sounds like a knockoff of Epcot. This dates back to the early 1900s, when Texas utilities wanted to avoid federal regulations. To do that, they had to keep their power transmissions within their state borders. Texas companies found they could maintain local control and avoid Washington's oversight. Federal rules only applied to companies that sent electricity across state lines. This has become a point of pride and a core belief of the Texas energy policy and matches the state's cultural identity. Texans do very much love living life on their own terms, especially when it comes to utilities. Of course, this has a few trade-offs. When the output demands become more than the grid can supply, Texas can't simply tap into a neighboring state's supply. For better or for worse, they are almost entirely alone. 1. Deaf servants. Back in the Ottoman Empire, the court was a dangerous place that was full of dark political plots and scary conspiracies. Gossip ran rampant, and secrets were getting out far too often and far too quickly. To stem this, the Sultan began to employ deaf and mute people to serve him and his court. These silent servants not only kept their lips zipped, for obvious reasons, and these attendants made the Sultan look more untouchable and godlike. The Sultan took what was perceived as a weakness in his people and turned it into one of his most powerful tools in his arsenal. He was able to get leaks under control with this ultimate security measure. Over the years, though, the servants began to develop their own language. This was centuries before any formal sign language came into existence. This Ottoman Sign Language became commonplace in the palace. They couldn't talk to each other, but that didn't stop them from finding a way to communicate. And there you have it, folks. I've gone through 25 amazing facts that probably stunned most of you. But which one shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you had fun with this list, make sure to check out our other video, 25 Facts About Time to Turn Your Brain to Mush. It is a must-see for sure. I'll link it both in the description box and it'll be up here shortly. And now, time for trivia. I'm curious to see how many of you can get this right without looking it up. Which country has the most time zones? Is it A, United States, B, Russia, C, France, or D, China? And that's it for today. But before you go, like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell so you don't miss anything. Thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you next time. Here comes a plane, time for me to go.